Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first ever prospective member webinar. We designed this webinar to be for those folks out there, local government officials and employees who have not yet joined loggers, to just give some high-level information about the system and about how to join. So I want to thank you all for attending and taking time out of your busy schedule today to attend this webinar. My name is Jeff Kemker, and I'm the Manager of Member Services for the Missouri Local Government Employees Retirement System. I do understand there are some folks that are attending this webinar today that are loggers members, and that's perfectly fine. I think there are some things that you're going to pick up through this webinar and hopefully learn something. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, if you would like to ask questions, please do so. I would like for this to be as interactive as humanly possible. And to do that, on your GoToMeeting interface that's on the right-hand side of your screen, unless you've moved it somewhere else, it should be on the right-hand side of your screen, you will see a tab for questions. If you simply click on the plus sign where it says questions, you can type your question in that box and click send or hit enter. I will see that question and I will answer them as they come in. So I would highly encourage questions throughout this webinar. You can ask them at any time. I will see them as they pop up, and I will simply answer them for the group as a whole, just like I would if I was there in person. We are also recording this webinar today, so we will have a video of the recorded webinar posted on Logger's YouTube channel shortly after the webinar is complete. If you would like any other information, such as the slides for this webinar or additional questions after this is over, please send me an email. You will be getting a follow-up email after the webinar is over with from my email address with my contact information, that you can simply respond to that and answer any additional questions that you have. So with all the housekeeping out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that I would like to talk about is why retirement benefits are so important. And I think you can look at this from an employer standpoint of why have retirement benefits at all, or why have benefits at all? Why not just simply pay employees' salary, cash compensation, and let them go out and purchase what they think they need as far as benefits are concerned? And I've heard a few different answers to this as far as why an employer should have benefits at all. And I heard one thing that I thought was pretty great, especially for public employees, talking about firefighters and why you should have pension plans for firefighters. And the response was, no one's going to run into a burning building for a 401k plan. And I think the message here is that having extra benefits, providing benefits for employees, promotes just a little bit more loyalty from the employee and also from the employer than providing just straight cash compensation. So specifically talking about retirement benefits, why are retirement benefits so important? Why should an employer devote part of their budget to providing retirement benefits for their employees? And really, I think it's a cyclical. It creates a cyclical promotion of employee loyalty when you provide these benefits, starting out with attracting quality workers. Again, you can simply provide salary for employees and let them be on their own for their retirement benefits, but if you want to attract quality workers, then having a pension plan in place is definitely going to help do that. There are more and more employees now and folks that are looking for jobs that are focused on retirement income and trying to figure out what they are going to do when they can no longer work and where is that income going to come from. And if you are an employer that can say, we have a pension plan that is going to provide income during your retirement years, that is definitely something that folks now are more attracted to and that they look for in a compensation package. Now, once you attract these quality workers, having a pension plan is also going to create incentive to stay with the employer during the employee's most productive years. So not only do you want to attract quality workers, you want to retain these people. And retaining folks is going to be a lot easier if you have a pension plan in place where it promotes longevity and the benefits are earned after a long career. And that's what pension plans do. The longer you work, the more you're going to receive from a benefit. Now, the reason that you, from an employer standpoint, provide a retirement plan at all, the main reason is simply to get people to retire. Obviously, if you're providing a retirement plan, you want people to actually use it, and you want people to be able to leave the workforce with a little pride and dignity. So providing a pension plan is going to provide these folks with a way that they can exit the workforce with a little pride and a little dignity, and they're going to be able to retire with a little bit of steady income that they can depend on. And from an employer standpoint, why does this matter? Well, there are numerous studies available out there that talk about the cost to the employer for employees not being able to retire when they should. And what this means is at some point we're all going to age. We're all going to get older. And we may reach a point when our compensation is not equal to the productivity that we're giving to our employer. And when that happens, what is our employer to do with us? They can fire us. They can demote us. If you have a pension plan in place that encourages these folks to retire when they should, it's going to move them through the system and provide that exit for them in a dignified way that they wouldn't have if you were just simply providing cash compensation and no benefits at all. And what this does for the younger employees, not only does it provide a path for them where they can begin their retirement planning at a very young age, but it keeps the lines of promotion open. So if you have experienced employees that just can't retire because they can't afford it, there's no exit, there's no path, there's no way for them to exit the workforce because they don't have any retirement plan to depend on. So their income stream is solely based on their job. And if there's no path for them to exit, they will just simply continue to work. Now that can be frustrating if you are a younger employee and you are working for an employer where people just simply don't retire. There's no path. There's no way that you can move up in the organization if there are folks that can't afford to retire, and so they just simply don't. Younger employees will be more incentivized to stay if they can see this movement through the workforce, and they know that when folks reach the age where they should retire, they will, because they have a path to do so. So it keeps the lines of promotion open, and then once that retiree exits the workforce with dignity, the younger employees are incentivized to stay and hopefully go after those promotions, and then we start the cycle all over again. That's why retirement benefits are so important. So specifically, what is loggers and what can loggers offer as far as a retirement benefit? First of all, loggers is what you call a nonprofit public pension system. We were created in 1967 by the General Assembly of the State of Missouri to provide retirement, disability, and survivor benefits for Missouri's local government workers. Loggers currently has 665 participating local government employers all over the state of Missouri. We have 35,000 participating workers, about 17,000 retirees, folks that are currently receiving a monthly benefit. We currently pay about $230 million in annual benefits to all of our retirees. And about 94% of that stays in the state of Missouri. So Missourians receive about $216 million from loggers each and every year across all of our retirees that live in the state of Missouri. Loggers members and Loggers as a system has over $6 billion in assets, and we are almost 92% pre-funded, which is really, really good. Comparing this to other systems all over the country, the average all over the country is about 72% funded. Now, how can an employer or employee become a member of Loggers? So, first of all, an individual cannot simply decide that they want to become a member of Loggers. The employer that individual works for must go through a process to join. And Loggers is what you call a statutory plan, meaning we are governed by the statutes that the General Assembly has created for us. And so because of that, there aren't any private companies or private employees that are eligible to join Loggers. The employer must be defined as a political subdivision in the state of Missouri. And basically what that means from a logger standpoint is that this political subdivision has to have an independent board and they have to have taxing authority. Most of the time, in most cases, if an employer meets these two requirements, they have an independent board and they have taxing authority, they will be eligible to join Loggers. The only exception is school districts. School districts are political subdivisions that have taxing authority, but they have their own pension plan, so they are not eligible to join Loggers. But if you work for an employer that meets these requirements, most likely they will be eligible to start the process to join Loggers. So what's the difference between Loggers and other retirement plans that are out there? So I would guess that most people are familiar with defined contribution plans or deferred compensation plans. These would be your 401As, your 401Ks, your 457Bs. The benefits are strictly based on an account balance, meaning your retirement benefit is going to be based on how much you put in, how much your employer puts in, and what the markets do throughout your career. There's really no way to know ultimately what your retirement income will be. There are ways to project it, obviously, and you can project it based on how much you think you're going to earn on those accounts over the years, how much you think you're going to put in, how much you think your employer is going to put in, et cetera, et cetera. There are ways you can project it, but there's really no way to know the money that you're putting in during your career, what you're going to get back from that. That's called a defined contribution plan. That's what most people are familiar with, and that's what most folks in the private sector now have, are defined contribution or deferred compensation plans. Loggers is what you call a defined benefit plan, and it's very different than an account balance based type plan. In a defined benefit plan, it's not based on an account balance. Your retirement benefit is based on a formula, and that formula takes into account how long you worked and how much you made and the benefits that your employer chooses. So traditionally, in a defined benefit plan, the longer you work, the more your benefit is going to be, and the higher your salary, the higher your benefit is going to be. So the benefit that you're going to receive when you retire is going to be a direct reflection of your actual working career, because it's based on your length of service and how much you made while you were working. That's what a defined benefit plan does. And no matter what age you are as a worker, you can easily estimate what your benefit is going to be in the future. And once you're eligible to receive that benefit, it's guaranteed monthly income that is predetermined by the formula. And you will receive a benefit every month for as long as you live. So it's a defined amount that you know what it's going to be, whether you are 25 years old or 65 years old. you can estimate easily what that benefit's going to be, and you know that it is guaranteed to be received for your lifetime. Let's dive into these two types of retirement plans in a little bit more detail. So I think when we talk about loggers, especially to prospective members, those who have not joined loggers yet, these are the main things that we need to understand about the system. Is really, what are we getting into when we are looking into a defined benefit plan? And really understand what that means for our workforce. So I think the best way to do that is just to strictly compare it to the other options that are out there. So let's compare loggers, a defined benefit plan, to defined contribution plans based on each one of these options here. All right, so first of all, who makes the investment decisions in a defined contribution plan? In a defined contribution plan, the employee or individual makes all the investment decisions. So you are responsible as the person contributing to your account. Your employer may be contributing to your account as well, but you are the person that makes the investment decisions. And you have to decide how much to put in, when to put it in, when to reallocate your assets, and when to make changes to your asset allocations, whether you should be more risky, take more risks in your portfolio, or whether you should be more conservative. All of those decisions lie on the worker. In a defined contribution plan, the investments are made by professionals, and Logger's Board of Trustees is the board that makes all the big global investment decisions. And the money that you put in and your employer puts in is invested by professionals. So the employee does not make the investment decisions related to their benefit. So who bears the risk? Who bears the market risk? Market risk is simply the risk of losing money by investing in the markets. So in a defined contribution plan, the market risk or the risk of losing money is on the employee. So you are putting money into an account, and based on what you invest in and the timing and the funds and what the markets are doing, all the risk comes back to the employee, the risk of losing money. In a defined benefit plan, that risk is on your employer or the employer that has joined Loggers. Because, as I said, we're not putting money into accounts for the individual employees. The employer is contributing money to the employer's account on behalf of all of the employees. And the employer will bear that market risk. How much they pay into Loggers is going to be determined in part by how well Loggers' portfolio performs. And we'll talk about more of that in a little bit. The amount of your benefit in a defined contribution plan, the amount of the benefit is just however much is in your account balance. So once you hit the age you want to retire, you look at your account balance, and the money that you have in that account is the money that you have to live on for the rest of your life. Now, obviously, if you choose to keep some of that money invested, it could still grow after you retire, but you're also going to be taking distributions from that account as well. So the amount of the benefit is strictly based on how much you can accumulate during your career. The amount of the benefit in Loggers or defined benefit plan is based on a predetermined formula of how long you work and how much you make. In a defined contribution plan, typically it depends on how the employer sets it up, but there usually is an option where you can take loans from that plan. So if you need to take a distribution from your plan and with a set time period of when you're going to pay that money back, that normally is allowed in a defined contribution plan, whereas in a defined benefit plan like Loggers, loans are not allowed. So if you're an active employee and you are putting money into Loggers, that money will remain with Loggers until you leave employment. So there are no loans allowed, and the same goes for hardship withdrawals. So typically in a defined contribution plan, depending on how the employer draws it up, they may be allowed to, if the employee falls on hard times or there's a disability or you need to buy a house or pursue your education, you can actually take withdrawals from your account to do that. With a defined benefit plan like loggers, you cannot. The distribution at retirement for a defined contribution plan a lot of times is just a lump sum. Most folks look at their account balance and they determine what they're going to do with that account balance when they hit retirement, whether they want to buy an annuity or take distributions from it here and there, or just take it out all at once. With a defined benefit plan like loggers, the distribution when you retire is a monthly payment for life. You cannot outlive your loggers benefit. Every month a retiree is alive, they will receive a benefit from loggers. Disability and survivor benefits are typically not provided for in defined contribution plans. They are in defined benefit plans. So if you pass away or if you become permanently disabled, as in you can no longer do your job, there may be benefits payable from loggers because of that. Fees. Fees are a big issue with defined contribution plans, and a lot of folks usually don't really understand the fees they're paying or how much they're paying for fees. But fees in a defined contribution plan are paid by the employee or by the worker. So these fees are actually eating away at your retirement savings, because a piece of your retirement savings is going towards paying those fees. Whereas in loggers, obviously, there is a cost for the administration of the system. But that's not directly tied back to the employee. It is actually netted from the investment earnings of the logger's portfolio. So whenever we receive earnings from our investments, we use those earnings to pay for the administration of the system. So I think this is a really good slide to keep handy when you're looking at the differences between these two types of plans. And you know, some plans are going to work better for employers than others. Some employers may be perfectly happy with a defined contribution plan because it works for their work group, and that's fine. Defined contribution plans are a good tool if they are structured properly. The best possible scenario would be to have both, to have a defined benefit plan like loggers, so folks have a base defined monthly retirement income, and they also provide a deferred compensation plan for their employees that they can invest extra funds into if they want. So as I said, a defined benefit plan is going to provide stable, predictable lifetime income during the retirement years. It's based on the length of service of the employee, the salary of the employee, and a multiplier chosen by the employer. So as I said, the longer you work, the more your benefit's going to be. The higher your salary, the more your benefit's going to be. And the other component of the loggers formula is a percent or multiplier that each employer chooses. So what kind of income can a logger's benefit provide? What are we talking about here with the logger's benefit? And am I going to become a millionaire if my employer provides loggers? Well, probably not, immediately anyway. So these are the different multiplier options that loggers has. And you can see they range from 1% to 2% and everywhere in between. Every individual employer in loggers chooses the multiplier that they want to provide for their individual group. So the higher this multiplier, the higher the retirement benefits for the employee group. Also, that means there's a higher cost to the employer. Obviously, if you have the 1% multiplier, that is going to provide a base type benefit, as opposed to the 2% multiplier that's going to provide twice the benefit that the 1% does. Because of that, it's going to cost the employer quite a bit more to provide that 2% multiplier. But the main thing, a beautiful thing about loggers is each individual employer makes that decision. Loggers' benefits are very flexible in that regard, in that the employer chooses what's appropriate for their group. And what's appropriate for their group might not be appropriate for other groups. The one that I'm going to talk about, an employer can choose whatever level they want to, but I'm going to use the 1% multiplier as an example. And when we talk about retirement income, a lot of folks like to talk about it in terms of replacement rates or replacement ratios. I'm sure everyone listening to this webinar has heard that term before. And basically what that means is when you are no longer working, how do you plan to replace that income? So you're not receiving your income from work any longer, so where is that income going to come from? And most financial planners have traditionally said, depending on the lifestyle that you want to live during retirement, you should plan to replace somewhere between 75 and 100% of your salary during retirement. Okay, so if you start thinking about that as an employee, thinking, okay, you know, the lifestyle that I want to live, I want to plan to replace about 90% of my salary during retirement. I think I could live on that. Well, where is that money going to come from? With a defined benefit plan like Loggers, it's very, very easy to calculate your replacement rate from your benefit, because you simply just look at the multiplier that your employer has chosen for you, and you multiply that by how long you work. So in this example, we are looking at a 25-year employee. So if you work for 25 years under Loggers and your employer has the 1% multiplier, that's going to replace 25% of your salary. Okay? Now, as I said, what if your goal is 90%? Okay, I want to replace 90% of my income. If I work for 25 years, I know I'm going to get 25% from my Loggers benefit. That's a guaranteed protected amount that I know I'm going to receive. But where's the rest going to come from? And that's where your investment accounts and your personal savings and Social Security, all of those things come into play. But you can look at this chart and look at the different multipliers and see that salary replacement rate. And then again, each individual employer chooses the rate that they believe is appropriate for their goals as a workforce. And then each individual employee is responsible for ensuring that they plan accordingly, and so they can meet their retirement needs whenever they get there. Let's look into this a little bit further. So Loggers benefits are designed to replace income. That is the main purpose of a defined benefit plan, is to provide income during your retirement years. I believe the main income of a deferred compensation plan is to lessen your current your current tax burden. That's really the main purpose of a deferred compensation plan. The main purpose of a defined benefit plan is to provide income during retirement. So let's look at an example here. This is an employee that had a pre-retirement salary. So this is the salary this employee was earning right before they retired, $55,667 a year. That was their annual salary right before they retire. Well, if they have Loggers and their employer has the 1% multiplier, that means their annual retirement income based on that 1% multiplier is going to be $13,920, or 25% of their pre-retirement salary. So their Loggers benefit is going to replace 25%. This employee's goal is to replace 80% of their salary. So where's the rest going to come from? Well, I know I'm guaranteed to get 25% from my Loggers benefit. That's set in stone. It can't be taken away from me. I know I'm going to get that. The rest is up to me with my personal savings and the amount I'm going to get from Social Security. So really what I'm trying to illustrate here is the fact that providing Loggers benefits do not mean that you are set in retirement by any means. Employees are still going to have to plan and save in order to maintain their standard of living during retirement years. However, Loggers benefits do provide a guaranteed protected base that an employee, that a worker can depend on whenever they retire. Benefits are paid from retirement to death, meaning every month an employee works, every month an employee works, they're going to earn a benefit towards a retirement that they receive each and every month. So let's look at an example with actual numbers plugged in. So using the same 1% multiplier that we've been using the entire time. If you're an employee and you kind of wanted to estimate what you think your retirement benefit is going to be, you would simply multiply the 0.01 times your monthly gross salary times 25 years, in this example, or however many years you have or plan to work, and that's going to equal $1,160 a month. So what that gives us is just like we looked at on the slide before, a $13,920 annually, which is about 25% of your pre-retirement income. And if you look at that, multiply out over a 20-year retirement. So what's the actual value of a benefit like this? If you received $13,920 every year from loggers and you live for 20 years in retirement, you would have received $278,385. So if you're looking at this example and you're thinking, boy, 25% of my income, that's not a whole heck of a lot. Almost $1,200 a month. That this logger's benefit isn't providing a whole lot of value for me. But if you keep in mind the fact that this benefit is going to be paid to you every single month for as long as you live, that number, that value, can be quite high. And these projections are not taking into account the cost of living adjustments that retirees receive from loggers. So when you retire, your benefit is also going to keep pace with inflation, and it's going to increase every year as inflation increases. Now, when an employer is looking into join loggers, one of the decisions they have to make is, who am I going to cover? As an employer, what employees do I want to be included in this retirement plan? They can choose to cover their general employees, and many of our employers, that's all they have is general employees. And by general, we mean anybody that's not a police officer or firefighter. Or they can cover their general and police and or their fire. So if you're a city, for example, many of our cities that are loggers members cover their general, police, and fire departments. But they certainly don't have to. An employer always has to cover their general employees, and then after that they can choose to cover their police and or fire. Now, an employer is also going to make a decision on how many hours per year an employee must work in order to be eligible for loggers benefits. An employer can choose 1,500 hours per year, 1,250 hours per year, or 1,000 hours per year. What this would mean is most of our employers choose 1,500 hours per year. What that simply means is that any employee that works 1,500 hours per year is going to be covered under loggers. Anybody that works less than 1,500 hours per year cannot be covered. Those are all decisions that an employer makes when they join loggers. Now, what are the eligibility requirements in order to begin to draw a retirement benefit from loggers? First of all, you have to work for 5 years. Once you work for 5 years, you are what we call vested in loggers, and you are guaranteed a retirement benefit. Even if you don't work your entire career with a logger's employer, as long as you work for 5 years, you are guaranteed a retirement benefit or some type of payment from the logger system. So let's say you are a 20-year-old employee, you start work for a logger's employer, you work for 5 years, you quit at age 25, and you never work for a logger's employer again. You worked for 5 years, you're 25 years old, you are guaranteed some type of distribution from loggers. And then that individual would have options as far as what they wanted to do with their benefit. If they want to take a lump sum, if they want to take a refund of what they had put in, or if they want to simply wait until retirement age to start drawing that monthly benefit for the rest of their life. Once you have your 5 years, the next eligibility requirement you need to meet is retirement age. So you can retire at normal retirement age, which is age 60 if you're a general employee, or age 55 if you're a police officer or firefighter. And we also have early or alternate retirement ages available that an individual can choose to retire early, or an employer can choose an alternate retirement age for the employees. Once you meet these requirements, you have 5 years of vesting, and you reach a retirement age. Then you are eligible to begin drawing a monthly retirement benefit from the loggers retirement system. So we've been talking about all the benefits that loggers offers. How much does it cost? That's the big question we get from folks looking at joining the system is, this all sounds great, but how much does it cost? Let's talk about that a little bit. First of all, there is going to be a monthly contribution from the employer and possibly the employee to pay for the benefits. So the employer in loggers is always going to be contributing something to loggers. It is not a system where the employer can simply provide it and the employees make all the contributions. The employer is always going to be contributing every month to the logger system to help fund the benefits. There is no upfront lump sum payment required. This is a common misconception we hear from prospective members, is that they have heard that there's a big lump sum that they have to pay when they join to pick up or buy back prior years of service or years that employees have already worked. That is not true. There is no upfront lump sum required. Now, an employer can choose to contribute a lump sum up front if they wish, but it is not required. So let's talk about how the cost for benefits can be shared between the employee and the employer. This is certainly an option in loggers where the employer can choose to share the cost for these benefits. And I want to look at a couple examples. And I'm just pulling these numbers out of my head. So don't think that this is going to be the cost for loggers' benefits. The cost for the benefits are based on each individual employer. Okay, this is just simply an example. So let's say that for a given set of benefits for the city of Small Town, Missouri, a fictional town, let's say that we tell them, okay, if you want to provide this set of benefits for your employees, it's going to cost you 12% of payroll. All right? So then the city council of the city of Small Town can say, okay, great. We are going to choose to be non-contributory, employee non-contributory, and we are going to pay the entire 12%. The employees are not required to contribute at all to loggers. We will contribute the full amount. That is an option. Or the employer could say, you know what, we kind of think the employees should have some skin in this game. We kind of think that they should help fund their future retirement benefit. If that were the case, every full-time employee that was eligible for loggers would be required to chip in 4%. It would not be optional to each individual. They would be required to chip in 4%. What that would do is that would lower then what the employer pays to about 8%, approximately. So whether an employer chooses to share the cost with the employees or not, the retirement benefit does not change because it's based on a formula. It's not based on how much the employee is contributing or if they're contributing. It's not the money that the employer is putting in is not going into an account for the employee. Keep that in mind. So whether the employee is contributing or not, that does not affect the amount of their retirement benefit. What it affects is the way that benefit is paid for. As you can see in this example, the cost is the same either way. The cost for the benefits are 12%. So the employer can either choose to pay the 12% and the employees contribute nothing, which would be great for the employees, or they could say, you know what, we think the employees should help contribute. All of the employees are going to contribute 4%, and the employer is going to contribute the rest. In this case, the rest is 8%. Let's talk a little bit about the employee contributions, because employee contributions in loggers are quite a bit different than contributions that an employee is going to make to an investment account like a deferred compensation account. First of all, as I said, contributions that an employee is going to make to loggers are required. If you have an employee that works the amount of hours, the required amount of hours per year, so they are a loggers member, and the employer chooses the option where the employees contribute, the cost-sharing option, then that employee will be required to contribute to loggers. It's a condition of employment. So employees are not allowed to opt in or out of the loggers plan. If they work the amount of hours, they will be required to contribute if that's the option their employer chooses. The employee contributions are guaranteed to be returned to the employee. An employee cannot lose a dime in loggers. I said at the very beginning that the market risk or investment risk of loggers benefits is on the employer. It's not on the employee. So every red cent that an employee contributes to loggers, they are always guaranteed to receive back at least what they've put in plus the interest that has been earned on that account. They cannot lose a dime by contributing to loggers. The contributions are after tax. This is a major difference between loggers' contributions from an employee standpoint and contributions to a deferred compensation account. If you contribute to a 457B account, deferred compensation through your employer, for example, those are before tax contributions. They are the contributions that you make to those accounts are subtracted from your taxable income, therefore lessening your tax burden each and every year. That is not the case with employee contributions to loggers. They are after tax, meaning that from an employee standpoint, if I'm contributing to loggers, I'm taxed on these contributions now. When I'm making the contributions, I'm taxed on them now. However, when an employee retires, they won't be taxed on those contributions when they get them back. Okay? They will only be taxed on the interest that account has earned. So they are after-tax contributions rather than pre-tax contributions. And also, as we covered in the chart, there are no withdrawals from loggers that are allowed while the employee is still working. So even though that every dime an employee contributes to loggers is their money and they're going to get that money back, they cannot take any distributions from their account while they're still working. This is a key feature for defined benefit pension plans, and I think a very good feature. There are far too many folks out there that are taking withdrawals and taking loans from their investment accounts that are supposed to be monies set aside for retirement. And taking a distribution or a loan while you're working and not paying that back can have huge implications on your retirement income status whenever you get there. So in loggers, there are no withdrawals that are allowed while you are still an active member of the system. All right, so we've talked about what the potential cost for the employee is. What about the cost to the employer? That's the big question. How much is the employer going to have to chip in to make this thing work? So the employer cost is based on many factors. It's not simply something like in a defined contribution plan where an employer can say, you know what, we're going to put in 5% this year, and next year we might change it to something else. Or if the employees put in 3% to their 457, we're going to put a match in of 3% to their 401A plan. The employer can choose their level of benefits that they want, and there's a cost associated with the levels of benefits that they choose, but they cannot strictly pick a percentage of pay that they're going to contribute. So what is the cost based on? How much does it cost? It's based on a lot of different factors. One of the big drivers of the cost is the demographics of the employee group. What this means is how experienced your employees are, their age, salary, service, all of those factors go into determining what the cost is going to be for that specific employer. all of our 665 employers have a different cost based on their specific employee group. The benefit options that the employer chooses is also a huge driver of what the cost is going to be. If an employer wants to provide the best possible benefits Loggers has to offer, they're going to have to pay for it. They're going to pay more than an employer that offers the lowest level of benefits. And again, it depends on what you are trying to accomplish with your benefit compensation package, what level that you choose. But the benefit options that are chosen play a huge role in what that cost is going to be for that specific employer. And then year-to-year adjustments. The rate is adjusted each year because Loggers has to make sure that the employer is contributing an amount that will fully fund the benefits that they have chosen for the employees. So they are adjusted each year, and we obviously notify the employer well in advance of what those adjustments are going to be. And the adjustments from year to year are based on how many people retired, how many people quit, did you replace those people, did you not, payroll changes from year to year, inflation, and investment return. So as I said, the market risk or investment risk, if you are in Loggers, is on the employer. And when Loggers does well with our investments, the employer gets credits back, and that will lower their rates. In fact, in fiscal year 2015, 7 out of 10 of our employer contribution rates are decreasing because Loggers investments have done so well the last couple of years. So employers, 73% of our employers are going to be paying less in 2015 for the exact same benefits. That's because of investment return. However, when the markets do not perform as well as we expect them to, that could put upward pressure on the employer rate. Now, there are some protections in place for the employer when that happens, but the market risk is on the employer. So again, what an employer pays is going to be individual for that specific employer. Now, I can tell you if you're saying, okay, Jeff, come on, just give us like an idea. I hear this almost every day. Can you at least just give me an idea? Is it going to be 20% of payroll, or is it going to be 2% of payroll? The average contribution rate for a Loggers employer is about 11.5% of payroll. Now, that's an average, and you can, we all know how averages work. So, that means we have a lot of rates that are a lot higher than that, and we have a lot of rates that are a lot lower than that. That's the average, is about 11.5% of payroll. The average cost for a new employer joining the system, coming in at the lowest benefit levels, is going to be about, it usually falls somewhere between 6 and 8% of payroll. That's what the employer would be paying. Okay, that's normally what we see. Under normal circumstances, an average employer looking at joining Loggers, coming into the system, the cost usually falls somewhere between 6 and 8% of payroll. Again, that's an average. I've seen them much lower than that and much higher than that. But that kind of gives you an idea of how much it's going to cost to get into the Loggers system. And again, to know what it would cost your specific employer, we have to do a little bit more analysis. So we've talked about how benefits are funded. A portion of the benefit is funded by the employee, potentially. A larger portion is funded by the employer. But the biggest portion of the funding for a retirement benefit is paid for by the investment return of the Loggers system. So let's look at kind of the same example we've been looking at this entire time. This is an employee that when they started working, they were earning $36,000 a year. That's about the average annual salary for a Loggers member in the state of Missouri. They had 2% salary increases each year. They themselves, the individual employee, contributed 4% of their gross salary every month for 25 years. Their employer contributed 7% every month of the employee's salary for 25 years. And they had the L1 benefit program. So as you can see from this graph, the employee over that time span contributed $46,124. Now that's just what they themselves have put in. Any interest earned that would be earned from that account is not factored in here. The employer over that time span contributed $80,716 towards this specific employee's benefit. Now keep in mind that that's not going into an account for that employee. That's going into the employer's account for all employees. So these were the contributions that were paid in for this employee. Now when this employee retires, based on their salary, the L1 benefit program, and if they live 20 years in retirement and receive a benefit each and every month, they're going to earn, as I showed before, same number, $278,385. Again, this does not include the amount they would receive from cost of living adjustments. So of that money that they receive, $46,000 of it is from their employee contributions. Another $81,000 is from the money that their employer put in. And the rest, the majority, is paid for through the investment return of the logger system, the return that's generated off of the contributions. It ends up funding about 60 to 65% of what that employee's retirement benefit is going to be. Now, what about the time that the employees have already worked? So when an employer looks at joining loggers, most of the time they're already going to have employees that have been working there for a certain amount of time. What about the time they've already worked? Is there a way that an employer can go back and what most people call it is, can we buy that time back for our employees? Can we treat that service that they've already worked here as if we joined loggers years ago from the beginning? And absolutely that is an option. So let's say you have a police chief at your employer that has worked for your employer for 20 years before you join loggers. The employer then, before they join, has the option to go back and actually pick up 25% of his time, which that means he would have 5 years of service whenever they joined. They could pick up 50% of his time, 75%, or 100% of his time. So the employer can actually go back and choose how much of the time that they want to buy back for their employee group. Now you have to choose the same percentage for everybody. So if you choose 100% for your police chief, it has to be 100% for all of your employees across the board. But basically what that means is you're treating the employees as if on the day they started, your employer already had loggers in place. That's what 100% prior service does. Now, as I said at the beginning, this is where the confusion comes in about the lump sum that's due. Obviously, there's a cost to pick up any of this time, and the employer is responsible for buying that time back. However, there is no lump sum upfront cost due when you join to pay for this. What we do is we amortize that cost over a closed 30-year period, and a portion of what the employer pays to loggers every month, a portion of those contributions go towards paying off these prior years of service. So after 30 years, if not sooner, this prior years of service will be fully paid for. Now, loggers also provides disability and survivor benefits in addition to the retirement benefits. So if an employee should become permanently disabled, they can no longer perform their job, or they pass away before they retire, there may be defined benefits payable in that case. That would be monthly benefits payable to the member in the case of a disability, or to the member's beneficiaries in the case of a death. What's the process to join loggers? If an employer wanted to look into joining loggers, there is a process that they have to go through, and this entire process If an employer is moving very quickly, the quickest that this could happen is probably 3 to 4 months. But most of the time, it takes quite a bit longer than that by the time the employer discusses it, weighs their options, has all their meetings, and all that. The first thing, the first step is we need to get some data about the personnel of the employer. This is when the current employees were hired, their birth dates, their salaries, that sort of thing. So we need demographic information about the current group of employees. And once we get this information, we send it to our actuaries, and our actuaries are the folks that are responsible for coming up with looking at the demographics of the group and looking at the logger's plan provisions and coming up with a cost based on those factors. So once they receive the personnel data, they will calculate what the cost will be. It's called an actuarial study. That actuarial study would be conducted and sent back to the employer. And then once the employer receives it, state law requires that that information received from the actuary be made public for 45 days. And then at any time after that 45-day period, the employer could adopt a formal resolution or ordinance to officially join the logger system. That's pretty much the three-step process. Now, obviously, there are a lot of little things that take place in between these three steps, but these are the big three steps that an employer must go through if they want to look into joining loggers. So I hope this this webinar has been. I hope you've learned something during this webinar, whether you're a member or a prospective member. I don't really see any questions that I received from anyone. So if you're ready to get started with loggers, or you have any more questions, here's the contact information. We have lots and lots of information on our website for a prospective member or a member in general. As I said, you're also going to receive a follow-up email about this webinar with my contact information that you can send questions directly to me. If you have any questions or want to discuss anything as it relates to loggers, please let me know. Again, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to attend this webinar. And please keep in mind that if you need anything, do not hesitate to contact me. Thank you all very much.